Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. I wish you all a pleasant time listening to books. Today, the book I am going to interpret for you is Naked Economics. Why add the words naked economics when talking about economics? Well, the subtitle of the original book reads, Undressing the Dismal Science, which means stripping away the dreary facade of this science. The label of dismal science was coined by the Scottish philosopher Thomas Carlyle over a century ago, and it has become well known because economics indeed appears extremely dry. It is filled with various grey terms, complex charts, and endless mathematical formulas, making it difficult for people to see its relevance to daily life or the exciting aspects of economic analysis. However, this book, Naked Economics, aims to shed the dull outer layer and show us the most crucial ways of economic thinking. The author, Charles J. Whelan, is a professor of economics at Northwestern University in the United States, and he has been actively involved in economics research. He has served as a correspondent for The Economist magazine in the Midwestern and Western regions of the U.S. and has published numerous articles in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Naked Economics is one of Whelan's main works, and as a popularizer of economics, it has been a bestseller in the United States for many years. The entire book contains no difficult-to-understand charts, terms, or equations. Instead, it uses everyday language and vivid examples, all while exploring the enlightening economic principles behind them. The first half of the book focuses on the field of microeconomics, mainly discussing individual wealth accumulation and the functioning of market economies. It delves into the issue of wealth disparity among individuals. The latter half concentrates on macroeconomics, addressing the wealth gap between nations. Understanding these topics not only helps us contemplate how to achieve a better life but also allows us to grasp the application of economic thinking and explore the laws governing the world's operations. The following audio is divided into two parts. In the first part, we will discuss the wealth disparity among individuals from a microeconomic perspective and explore the key factors behind personal wealth accumulation. In the second part, we will discuss the wealth gap between nations from a macroeconomic viewpoint, understanding why some countries are wealthy while others struggle with poverty. Alright, now let's move on to the first part. We'll talk about the microeconomic perspective on understanding the wealth disparity among individuals and the key factors behind personal wealth accumulation. Microeconomics primarily studies the economic behavior of individuals in the market and the mechanism of the market itself. The key to understanding individual economic behavior can be summed up in one word: maximization. It means that each individual seeks to improve their situation as much as possible. People aim to maximize their happiness or, as economists call it, utility. Similarly, businesses strive to maximize their profits. The key to understanding market mechanisms is also encapsulated in one word: scarcity. Economists believe that resources are limited while human desires are unlimited. Thus, markets are necessary to allocate resources. How does the market allocate resources? The most important tool is price. Western economics suggests that the scarcer a resource is, the higher its market price will be. This doesn't necessarily relate to the intrinsic value of the resource. For instance, diamonds, which are scarce, command high prices, while water, despite its vital importance, is relatively cheap. Prices express how much society objectively needs a resource, while market prices reflect how much individuals subjectively desire that resource. Ultimately, those who can afford the market price will gain access to the resource. Now that we've introduced the two crucial concepts in microeconomics, maximization and scarcity, we can use them to explore an enduring and attention-grabbing economic issue: income inequality. Even in the supposedly wealthiest country in the world, the United States, many people still live in extreme poverty. While top billionaires like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Elon Musk enjoy luxurious lifestyles with fancy cars and private jets, others are forced to scavenge for food in trash bins and spend their nights in train station bathrooms. When observing such phenomena from an individual's perspective, it may be easy to focus on factors like social background and luck, elements beyond human control. However, economists argue that to understand income inequality more generally, we must start with the concept of human capital. Strictly defined, human capital refers to the sum of skills embedded within an individual, including education, intelligence, charisma, creativity, and even physical abilities like running fast. In simple terms, if someone were to take away everything from you, your job, money, and family, and leave you homeless, your human capital would be what's left. Surprisingly, some formerly wealthy individuals, like the King of Brunei, might not fare well if they lost their wealth, as their riches are mostly due to the country's oil reserves, not their personal abilities or skills. On the other hand, someone like Bill Gates would likely still thrive because, even if Microsoft went bankrupt and his wealth were seized, he would still be in high demand as a consultant, board member, or CEO for other companies. It's not just about the individual's abilities, income disparity still exists among those with valuable skills. For example, while fast food workers at McDonald's in the United States might earn just a few dollars per hour, outstanding defense attorneys might make hundreds of dollars per hour. Education or academic qualifications alone cannot fully explain this discrepancy. The economist's perspective points to the role of scarcity in these phenomena. The Nobel laureate economist Robert Solow, a baseball enthusiast, was once asked by the author if he felt troubled that his Nobel Prize winnings were less than what a top baseball player like Clemens could earn in one season. Solow replied, "No, because there are many outstanding economists in the world, but there's only one Clemens." In other words, the scarcity of Clemens' human capital far outweighs Solow's. This exemplifies the way economists approach the problem, considering scarcity as a key factor. With this perspective, the income disparity issue becomes much clearer. Around the time the author wrote this book, there were approximately 150 million people in the United States capable of selling a McDonald's value meal, a skill that is not scarce. Hence, the fast food restaurant pays them wages that are just enough to sustain a basic living. During economic downturns, this might be around $5.50 per hour, while in times of labor scarcity, it might rise to $9 per hour, but it will never reach hundreds of dollars per hour. That kind of income is reserved for outstanding programmers, doctors, lawyers, writers, athletes, and others with specialized and scarce skills. In summary, when looking at the labor market through the lens of economics, there is no distinction between it and any other market. The scarcer the resource you possess, the greater the returns it can bring you. However, there's another aspect to consider regarding the scarcity of human capital, the time lag between investment and monetization. So, how is human capital formed? It mainly occurs through education and various practical experiences, which can be seen as investments in ourselves. But when does human capital start to generate returns for us? It happens when we enter the job market. However, the demand for various types of human capital in the market is constantly changing. For example, at one stage, there might be a high demand for skill A, making it scarce and commanding a higher price. But in the next stage, skill B might become more scarce, leading to higher prices for that skill. In such cases, if you focused on accumulating human capital in skill A during your education, by the time you enter the job market, the returns might fall short of your initial expectations. For instance, imagine graduating from the world's top horse-drawn carriage driver training school the year automobiles began mass production. Despite being highly skilled, you might find yourself without a job because the demand for such skills has drastically diminished. While this example might be extreme, let me share another one from my experience. When I was in school, I studied finance, and most of my classmates went to financial institutions or government-owned companies after graduation. Recently, at a gathering, a classmate who worked in investment banking at a top brokerage firm mentioned that his salary was nearly the same as what the company offered new graduates a decade ago. However, the competition for the same position had become visibly intense over the years. Reflecting on it, about a decade ago was around the time I was in high school. Back then, the financial talent pool was relatively scarce, so the field had an aura of elitism and was one of the highest-paying professions. This led to a surge of students choosing economics and finance as their preferred majors in universities. However, over the years, the financial industry gradually became saturated with talent, diminishing the advantage in wages and benefits. Fast forward to 2020 to 2021, and many software engineers were earning salaries that surpassed those in the financial industry, making them the new generation of scarce talents. Consequently, related majors in technology fields once again became hot favorites among students. We often say that the economy and commodity prices follow cycles. Similarly, the prices of various types of human capital face cyclic fluctuations. When discussing human capital, people often emphasize the importance of accumulating capital, emphasizing growth over success and being friends with time. However, from the perspective of investment and monetization, if the direction of your human capital accumulation is wrong, you might not be a friend of time, you could even become its enemy. This situation arises when, while choosing where to invest your human capital, you believe you are making decisions based on the principle of maximizing benefits. However, you are inadvertently treating the current price of human capital as if it were the future price. In doing so, you're bringing a long-term decision-making problem into a short-term formula. Those who seize market opportunities are not just acting when the trend is obvious, they start positioning themselves when faint signals of price changes begin to emerge in the market. In summary, if you want to turn your human capital into wealth in the labor market, it requires long-term accumulation and strategic positioning well in advance. So, are there any legitimate channels to acquire wealth faster? Many people might think of shifting to the capital market. Indeed, securities prices change much faster than labor prices, and many individuals aim to make quick profits or even get rich overnight through short-term buying and selling of securities. However, the reality is that only a few manage to achieve this. Why is that? From an economic perspective, it's quite simple. The capital market is also a market where everyone holds the same resource, money. If everyone seeks to maximize returns on their money, the ultimate result is that everyone can only achieve average returns. It's similar to when we are at the supermarket checkout, and we actively look for the shortest queue. But when everyone does the same, all the queues become almost the same length. Occasionally, you might see a queue that seems much shorter than the others, but after joining it, you might discover an elderly lady with a cart full of groceries, taking a long time to check out. So, the usual result is that regardless of which queue you choose, the waiting time is almost the same. Now, imagine someone approaching you while you're in line and claiming they found an exceptional queue where the checkout is lightning fast, promising you complete satisfaction. Would you believe them? Probably not, because you know that such a pie won't just fall on your head out of nowhere. The same principle applies to financial investments. The author of the book points out that when someone promises you exceptionally high returns, there are usually three possible truths behind it. 1. The investment carries extremely high risks. 2. The person might have stumbled upon an opportunity that even other investment experts missed, and they're very kind to share it with you. 3. The person is lying. According to economists, in the capital market, most people can only achieve average returns. Therefore, the rational approach to wealth accumulation through investments is to buy into index funds and hold them for the long term. The essence of doing this is to earn the market's average returns, not just the average returns among individual stocks but also the average returns between different years in the market. The author mentions in the book, "Do I know the closing price of the Dow Jones Index tomorrow? No, I don't. How about next year? I don't know either. What about 5 years from now? It might be higher than today, but I'm not entirely certain. But what about 25 years from now? I'm quite confident that it will significantly surpass today's level." So, whether in the labor market or the capital market, the growth of wealth requires a long-term approach. Any wealth strategy must adhere to the fundamental laws of economics. Those enticing overnight riches, under the scrutiny of economics, are merely illogical exceptions. Alright, earlier, we discussed how to use microeconomics to understand wealth disparities between individuals. Now, let's take a look from a macroeconomic perspective at how to perceive the wealth disparities between nations. Why are some countries wealthy while others are struggling to overcome poverty? To explore this question, we first need to understand how to measure a country's economic level. The most commonly used indicator is gross domestic product, GDP. GDP is the total value of all goods and services produced and provided by an economy within a specific time frame, calculated at market prices. When we see annual rankings of the world's economies, they are generally based on annual GDP figures. For example, in 2020, the United States held the top spot with a GDP of approximately $21 trillion, followed by China at nearly $15 trillion, and Japan at around $5 trillion. However, when comparing nations' prosperity on a global scale, we primarily focus on GDP per capita, which reflects the average level of affluence among a country's population. Critics argue that GDP has its limitations as a measure of economic progress. For instance, it doesn't consider economic activities that don't involve monetary transactions. For example, a mother cooking meals, taking care of her children, and tidying up the house wouldn't be included in GDP. However, if she were to dine out, send her children to daycare, and hire a cleaning lady, these expenses would contribute to GDP. GDP also fails to account for hidden costs like environmental degradation. If a company clears an entire forest to produce paper, the value of the timber might be added to GDP, but the damage to the forest wouldn't be taken into consideration. Moreover, GDP per capita is just a simple average and doesn't consider income distribution. When a wealthy person's income is averaged with those of 99 poor individuals, it can mask the issue of income inequality within a country. To address these shortcomings, some economists have proposed alternative indicators. One example is the Social Health Index, which includes 16 social indicators such as child poverty, infant mortality rate, crime rate, and healthcare accessibility. Another is the Gross National Happiness Index, which covers 4 domains: government, economic growth, cultural development, and environmental protection, with a total of 72 indicators. Several countries have begun using the Gross National Happiness Index as a measure of development, with the goal of maximizing citizens' happiness rather than merely maximizing GDP. The various ways of measuring economic development all depend on how one defines economic progress. Thus, each indicator contains a certain degree of subjectivity, and there's no absolute right or wrong way. Despite the imperfections of GDP, people still value it because it reflects the material foundation that sustains a country's economic functioning. Given equal conditions, having more goods and services produced by a country is generally preferred to having fewer. While GDP growth doesn't necessarily equate to increased happiness, a decline in GDP serves as a clear indicator of deteriorating living conditions. For instance, negative GDP growth signals a shrinkage of total production, resulting in unemployment, business closures, and idle production capital. This situation can lead to an economic recession, bringing about a series of negative consequences for society. In summary, the emphasis on GDP as an indicator is not only due to the pursuit of economic growth but also stems from the vigilance towards economic decline. However, as we mentioned earlier, GDP is not the sole way to measure economic progress. This book also introduces supplementary indicators apart from GDP, such as unemployment rate, poverty rate, savings rate, government size, population structure, and the Gini coefficient, which reflects income inequality levels. Alright, we've discussed how to measure a country's economic level. Now let's delve into the exploration of economists concerning the wealth disparities between nations. The author first points out a truth: economists haven't discovered a secret formula to transform impoverished economies into prosperous ones. While there have been successful examples of countries transitioning from poverty to wealth, such as the Asian tigers, there is currently no universally proven growth formula that can be easily applied from one nation to another like a chain store expansion. Interestingly, when it comes to why rich countries become wealthy, economists seem to have many answers, such as effective government institutions, well-defined property rights, open trade, and quality public education, among others. However, this leads to a challenging question: if we can identify the common characteristics of prosperous nations, why is it still so difficult for poor countries to escape poverty? The author likens explaining why rich countries prosper to comparing why Michael Jordan was a great basketball player with others who play basketball similarly. It's one thing to explain why rich countries succeed, but developing a strategy to uplift a poor country is an entirely different matter and far more challenging. Consider a simple analogy: we know that when a large population has access to quality education, establishing an effective government becomes somewhat easier. However, to establish a good public education system, you need the support of an efficient government. The question then becomes similar to the "which came first, the chicken or the egg" dilemma. It's hard to answer. Over the past half-century, economists have been attempting to assist poor countries in achieving prosperity, but many of their strategic suggestions, initially met with approval, have ultimately failed. There's an old joke that humorously encapsulates the essence of these failed strategies. It goes like this: a farmer noticed his chickens were dying, so he sought help from a priest. The priest advised the farmer to pray for the chickens, but the situation didn't improve. Then, the priest suggested playing music for them in the coop, but the number of dead chickens remained unchanged. Finally, the priest recommended painting the chicken coop in bright colors. As a result, all the chickens died. The priest shook his head and said, "What a pity, I had many more great ideas." Regarding how poor countries can become wealthy, the author believes that compared to the various suggestions proposed by economists, direct assistance from wealthy nations is a more effective choice. Wealthy countries possess more government funding and have research-based universities and national laboratories with substantial resources. Therefore, they have a clear advantage in industrial investment, technological research and development, and resolving developmental issues like diseases. The author also points out that many countries remain poor because wealthy nations haven't exerted their full effort to help them. When there's an immense political will to improve their situation, circumstances can indeed change for the better. International aid is not only based on humanitarian grounds but also essential because in a globalized market, economic downturns in foreign countries can quickly spread across borders. Turmoil in one country can also become a precursor to chaos in other parts of the world. The above is the essence of the book, Naked Economics, that I want to share with you. Let's summarize it briefly. In the first part, we discussed how to use microeconomics to understand the wealth disparities between individuals. The key to understanding microeconomic behavior lies in maximizing utility, while understanding market mechanisms relies on scarcity. Economists believe that differences in human capital scarcity are the most significant factors contributing to individual wealth disparities. Additionally, any wealth strategy, whether in the labor or capital market, must follow the fundamental laws of economics. Those tempting get-rich-quick schemes are merely illogical outliers when scrutinized through an economic lens. In the second part, we primarily explored how to view wealth disparities between nations from the perspective of macroeconomics. We first discussed how to measure a country's economic level, mainly focusing on the crucial indicator, GDP. Despite its flaws, GDP plays the role of allowing us to see the larger economic picture of foreign countries. We emphasize GDP not only for its association with growth but also for its warning signals of economic downturns. Finally, we discussed economists' exploration of how to uplift poor countries. The author suggests that providing direct international assistance to poor nations is a more effective choice compared to simply offering recommendations. This assistance is not just rooted in humanitarianism but also for the collective advancement of humanity. Regarding economic thinking, the book adds a few more remarks. Nobel laureate in economics, Robert Fogel, once said, "Before we can have a good life, we must first define what a good life is." This points to the importance of clarifying what we truly seek to achieve a better life when using economic thinking. The book illustrates an example of columnist Anthony Lewis from the New York Times, who marveled at the beauty of a small Italian farm. Though it appeared uneconomical amidst the world of corporate agriculture, it should be preserved because a life civilized by culture is much richer than an unregulated market. This view might not be entirely endorsed by economists, but it highlights that decisions to preserve certain lifestyles or aesthetically pleasing aspects may not be solely driven by economic rationality. Economics is a tool, neutral in itself, and its coloration reflects the pursuits and happiness we wish to achieve through its application. That concludes the essence of this book. Congratulations on listening to another book, and thank you for joining the Tim Booker channel. Please subscribe to the channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom with practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you all, and goodbye.